Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. My name is Franco Vaccarino, and I have the privilege and honor of serving this great university as President and Vice Chancellor. So again, greetings, welcome. I'd like to acknowledge this evening that our Chancellor, David Mirvish, is here with us today, as well as Dr. Don Bruce, Dean of the College of Arts, and I welcome all of you along with our many guests here to the University of Guelph, our faculty, staff, friends, alumni, and community members. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening for the distinguished Dasha Shenkman Lecture in Contemporary Art. I have to stress, I can't stress this enough, that none of this would have been possible without the generous support of Dasha Shenkman. And Dasha, once again, thank you for your support. You've been absolutely terrific. It means the world. Thank you. Now, I have to share with you that I was fortunate enough last year at around this time to attend my first Dasha Shenkman lecture on contemporary art. And at the time, the announcement of my presidency had just been made, and so it was actually my first official introduction to the community, and to this particular community, before I actually became president, but after the announcement. And it was it's a reminder for me, and I mentioned this last night at a reception, how important beginnings are. How things start has a lot to say about how things continue and unfold. And so my beginning here actually started with this event last year. And it was a wonderful beginning and really introduced me to a very special community and reinforced many of the good things that I felt right from the beginning about the university, and has certainly been the case over the last 8 months since I've taken on the role. So this year, the 9th year of this annual lecture means a great deal to me. I was first attracted to the University of Guelph in many ways because of the sense of community and the enormous pride in that community that is felt here, and now feeling part of this community with its shared commitment and passion for teaching and learning, a commitment and passion that is very much embodied in this event this evening. I like to talk about the concept of knowledge and learning in action. And I think tonight's lecture is going to be that in spades, and we'll get a formal introduction for that in a moment. I'm honored to be here to spend this evening with you. I'm delighted at this point to introduce Dr. Sally Hickson. Dr. Hickson is a specialist in Renaissance art history and was appointed last year as the director of the School of Fine Art and Music. Dr. Hickson has taught at the University of Guelph since 2006. Earlier, she held appointments at Brock, McMaster, and Queen's Universities, and taught also at the Queen's Summer School in Venezia. Wonderful. She'll tell us more about the Shenkman Lecture in Guelph's Visual Arts Program and introduce Dr. Robert Enright, who will formally introduce tonight's lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Hickson.
Good evening, everybody. So wonderful to see so many people here. The Dasha Shenkman Lecture in Contemporary Art, now in its 9th year, is a clear indication of the continually increasing reputation of the visual arts programs offered here at the University of Guelph. I want to, on behalf of SOFAM, welcome and thank Dasha Shenkman for this wonderful annual event. I want to thank Michael Snow for being our speaker this year, and welcome Peggy Gale. And I want to thank all the members of the Shenkman Committee who helped guide me through my freshman year, participating in the organization and planning for the lecture and for the accompanying open studios. In particular, James Carl and Robert Enright, valued members of our SOFAM community, the wonderful Jen Lorette, the tireless and highly organized Vicki Isertown, Sandy Sabatini, Sue Bennett from the President's Office, SART faculty members Sandra Retchico and Martin Pierce, and MFA candidate Jasmine Reimer, and all of the volunteers who were out today in the rain to guide everyone around from building to building. Thank you also to Mary Simons for her valuable guidance to our committee this year, and thank you to the extraordinary Margaret Priest and Tony Sherman for your graciousness to me, for your continued dedication to the program, for everything you've done for us, and for introducing us to Dasha. Thank you for that. So we're really here because of the success and the reputation of the Guelph Art Experience. And the formula for that is pretty simple. You start with an exceptional faculty, the best faculty, drawn from across the broad spectrum of contemporary art and art historical practices, and you create and nurture a program that attracts exceptional students, drawn from a really competitive field of applicants. You keep things small and intense and creative, and in the case of our MFA program, you give your students 2 intense years of focused faculty attention, visiting artists, opportunities like this, public critiques, and peer support. And in the process, you make a real and a lasting impact on our country's visual culture. The young artists, art historians, musicians that we continue to train in SOFAM at both the undergraduate and graduate levels are part of the past, the present, and the future of the discourse of Canadian art, and that's very important to us. With the generous support of our donors, we have had an opportunity to make a real, measurable, and lasting contribution to visual culture in Canada. The Dasha Shenkman Lecture, the accompanying open studios, has consistently attracted the attention of distinguished gallerists who have supported the emerging careers of our alumni, curators and museum directors who collect and exhibit the work of our artists, and of course the artists themselves, as well as critics, journalists, and collectors who have so generously opened so many doors for our students. I want finally to sincerely thank our donors and our sponsors who have committed their time and their resources to our school and to what we do here. We think what we do is important, and you do too, and I want to thank you very much for that. I will end up by offering an open invitation to all of you, if you haven't already done so, to consider touring the MFA studios and the specialized studios of our fourth-year students soon to graduate after this evening's lecture. There are signs and maps available everywhere, and the studios will be open until 9 o'clock tonight. So you just have to look for the guides in their ponchos, waving their glow sticks, and they'll tell you where you can go and visit the studios. It's now my very great pleasure to introduce writer, critic, broadcaster, and university research professor Robert Enright to say a few words about tonight's lecturer.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Dr. Hickson. I love to say Dr. Hickson. I've been introduced as Dr. Enright. I don't have a doctorate, so forget that. I'm the least educated person in this room, I can assure you. I also want to remind you that don't be surprised if you see a film crew wandering around. There's a documentary being made about Michael by Laurie Kwasnick, and the documentary is being called Fields of Snow, so this is one of the fields that she's going to be tilling before the documentary gets done. So if you see a camera, it's legitimate. When Michael Snow moved to New York in the early 60s at the age of 34, he was already a good artist. When he returned to Toronto a decade or so later, he was well on his way to being a great one. In the following 4 decades, he became his future. It made him the most significant artist the country's ever produced. I'm most assuredly not alone in that estimation. Recently, I've spoken to artists as different as Chantal Ackerman in Paris and Linda Benglis in New York, and both talked enthusiastically about the profound influence that Seeing Wavelength, Snow's 1967 masterpiece, had on their development as artists. When Wavelength was shown at the Filmmakers Cinematheque in 1967, it represented only one aspect of what Michael has described as the triple life he was living in New York. He was a filmmaker, a music maker, and an image maker. And in each of these art forms, he was on the cutting edge of avant-garde practice. Only 4 years after it was made, Wavelength was celebrated in a now famous article published in Art Forum and written by the influential critic Annette Mitchelson as a turning point in the history of the medium. Manny Farber, the distinguished film critic, speculated that Wavelength may become the birth of a nation of underground films. What Michael Snow had done in film, he was doing in music and visual art as well. His 1964 film, New York Eye and Ear Control, with music by a sextet of the best jazz musicians in New York, who regularly used to jam in Michael's studio on Canal Street, is considered now one of the 3 most significant free jazz compositions ever recorded. The film attempted to make sound and image equal perceptual partners, and the image it used was the walking woman, a cutout shape that had occupied Snow from 1961 to 67. In his play Antony and Cleopatra, Shakespeare praises Cleopatra's infinite variety. As the Queen of the Nile went, so goes the walking woman. Michael placed her in streets and artist lofts in Toronto, New York, and in many European cities. She was a globetrotter, and today she ranks with Tom Wesselman's Great American Nude and de Kooning's Women as an emblem of the eternal appeal the image of woman holds in the human imagination. Michael, like his creation, is also a globetrotter. He's been involved in countless exhibitions and performances around the world in various media, in film, photography, and sculpture, and he continues to perform as a pianist in music events from Paris to Tokyo. His honors are almost commensurate with his achievements. He's a Companion of the Order of Canada, a Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters in France, has won the Governor General's Award for Media Arts, the Gershon Iskowitz Prize, and I think has been awarded 6 honorary doctorates. Are there more now? They kind of, I know, they're like 10 pins in a bowling alley. Just line them up and knock them down. In 2013, an exhibition called Oh Canada opened at Mass MoCA in North Adams, Massachusetts. And that show, by the way, is on right now at the Esther Foundation until the end of the month in Calgary. Oh Canada was an ambitious survey of the best contemporary Canadian art, mostly by young and mid-career practitioners. Included among the 62 artists was Michael Snow. At 85, he was the most senior artist in the exhibition. He was also the most radical. His 2002 film, Solar Breath, Northern Caryatids, showed a curtain being sucked against the casement window by the wind and then released by the same natural force. In image and sound, it's a perfect film. It demonstrates Michael Snow's genius. He's discovered that the most simple things, the silhouette of a figure, the slow movement of the camera's eye, the way that sound is a shape, are revelations. Michael Snow has described film as a kind of container that makes fortuitous things belong. His description makes me think how fortuitous it is that he's chosen Canada to be the place where he's contained the things and sounds that he's made over an unparalleled career as an artist and musician, and how much what he has made belongs to us. Please join me in welcoming Michael Snow.
Robert didn't mention public speaker. For good reason. But I'll let you judge that. I want to thank Dasha for the creative involvement that's contained in the Shenkman Prize. It really adds to what can be done. Okay. I'm going to start my talk, excuse me, on the music side. Sound has been an important and varied factor in my work since the 40s. That's 1940s, not 1840s. I had, boy, I think I should have set myself up with a drink.
It's not vodka, I'm sorry to say.
Thanks, Joe. Now, what am I going to do with it? Thanks.
I'll see you then. That's fine, thank you.
Well, that was... okay, we'll attempt to start again. Yes, I think it was 1946. I heard certain jazz recordings on the radio, and as I investigated the idiom and heard more, I realized that I would like to play the piano like that. I set about teaching myself how to play the piano like that, and soon met some other young musicians who were also interested in playing New Orleans jazz, and I started to play publicly. For about 3 years, I made my living from playing with Mike White's Imperial Jazz Band, which played every night except Sunday and Monday at the Westover Hotel on Dundas Street in Toronto. The band played a television gig in 1959. That's 1959. Here's a fragment of our playing of Sweet Georgia Brown. In passing, I can't help but mention that the three horn players, good musicians and good friends, Mike White, cornet, Ian Arnott, clarinet, and Alf Jones, trombone, are all dead. But here is a few minutes of their joie de vivre, thanks to recording.
Listen now to Mike White and his Imperial Jazz Band.
Thank you. Thank you. I liked it too. Well, this is obvious to those in the know, but jazz improvisation uses the chord changes of the subject tune more than the melody as a source of ideas. Sweet Georgia Brown's chord changes are quite basic. It's a 32-bar tune divided into two 16-bar sections. It starts with 4 bars of an E 7th chord, then there are 4 bars of an A 7th chord, and so on. This openness is actually an inspiring feature of many jazz standards, but complicated chord changes can also be inspiring. During the 50s, improvising on the complex chord changes of the bridge of the tune Cherokee was a challenge that issued from Charlie Parker and other new jazz musicians. The trumpet, trombone, and clarinet front line originated with New Orleans marching bands and was the instrumentation of the classic, historically important mid-20s recordings of Louis Armstrong's Hot Five. Within the guides of lead, counterpoint, and basic harmony, this instrumentation trio was groundbreakingly free. The first jazz recordings were made in 1917 by a group called the Original Dixieland Jazz Band, which was brought from their native New York to record in New York. Historically, it's interesting that the 12-bar blues was the form of one of the pieces, Livery Stable Blues, which indicates that playing the blues was familiar by 1917. Also, this piece has imitation barnyard sounds played by the trumpet, trombone, and clarinet. So, making the instruments behave in ways that they weren't intended to was also established by 1917. Stylistically, manipulating the sounds of the instruments was subsequently developed in much richer ways by many musicians after the first jazz recordings. In the 20s in Chicago, King Oliver recorded Dippermouth Blues, which claims to use a dippermouth as a mute. Duke Ellington, starting in the 20s, exploited wah-wah and growl techniques on trombone and trumpet. While I was playing with Mike White's band, he invited every month or so American stars to play with us. One of these extraordinary musicians was Cootie Williams, who had inherited the growl trumpet technique from Bubba Miley and whose sound was wonderful to accompany. Besides studying jazz records, in 1950, I bought the 12-inch 78 RPM album, which one of the record companies had issued, of Wanda Landowska playing the Goldberg Variations on harpsichord. I was all ears at the time, and listening to Bach's Variations was part of my research on improvisation. Certain recordings which had been issued in the 20s, but not reissued, had become legendary, and a man named Boris Rose in New York could, on order, make a direct cut disc copy. I acquired some interesting rarities that way. Starting in 1948, I often played with Ken Dean, a trumpet player that I met in high school. Amazingly, Ken's band developed some fans, followers, who often came to hear us. One of these people was Eric Clutterford, who was a machinist, and he did something astonishing. He built a portable disc-cutting recording apparatus. He brought it and recorded the Ken Dean Band as we played in public at concert dances at the Balmy Beach Canoe Club and on Center Island and at other places. He also recorded in 1948 some piano solos by me, one of which I'd like to play now. It's called Montana in Toronto. My playing is not an imitation, but was admiringly influenced by the only 4 recordings made by this boogie-woogie pianist named Montana Taylor. A group of us jazz nuts went to Chicago in the summers of 1949 and 50 and had the incredibly good luck to be invited to a house rent party at Jimmy Yancey's apartment on the south side. Yancey was one of the most original of the boogie-woogie pianists. Albert Ammons, another boogie giant, played at that party, and so did I. I admired Yancey's music and could play like him. We nicknamed our recording engineer King Cutty, and the label name was Cool Jazz was his joke. Modern or cool jazz was not what we were interested in. We liked hot jazz. So here is Montana in Toronto. Thank you. The 12-bar blues idiom exemplified in Montana and Toronto is a form like the sonnet in poetry. One can just play the blues. Themeless blues playing is the opening to free improvisation with no prearranged tunes. My piano playing has gone through an evolution from its jazz influences to what I now feel is really my music. However, in some senses, I am still playing the blues. The separation of the left and right hands, the equivalent of a rhythm section on the left with a horn section on the right, which is clear in all jazz piano styles, from Jelly Roll Morton to Harlem Stride piano, has given way in my playing for at least the last 30 years to both hands all over the place. Of course, solo playing is different from group free improvisation. When I play solo, I prepare what I call areas of particular musical processes and try to discover new passages in the in-public investigation of them. Laurie Kwasnick, a filmmaker from Toronto who is here today, has been working on a film about my music and me. I played a solo piano concert in Vienna at an historic concert hall. She had the concert shot by two skilled cameramen and then edited it into what I think is an eloquent record of what happened on February the 26th, 2012. Here is a 2.5-minute fragment from what was a 34-minute performance. February the 13th by the CCMC. It was recorded in 1979 in Toronto at the Music Gallery, which CCMC, or the CCMC, created. The whole piece is 24 minutes and 33 seconds, but I will play the first 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It's a good example of the variety that we were seeking and that we achieved. Casey Sokol plays piano on it. I played trumpet. I had started to play trumpet in the 50s, but with CCMC, I used it quite a lot. I mentioned the variety of qualities that jazz introduced as a field of inquiry. I tried to continue that search by making mutes. In AKA February 13th, I used some of those mutes. Casey Sokol also played steel drum on this piece, and Al Mattis, and Al is here. Hello, Al. Played marimba, acoustic bass, electric bass, and steel drum. Nabi Kubota played a siren, some whistles, alto saxophone, bass drum, crackle box, and marimba, as well as trumpet with mutes. I also played marimba, siren, and a few notes on electric piano on the entire piece. John Cage's move to very much oversimplify from Schoenberg's tonal system to raw sound qualities, his pieces for radios and prepared piano being good examples, was influential. CCMC and the equally amazing Artist Jazz Band are related. The Artist Jazz Band was active in the 70s. The players were all painters. Graham Coventry, Robert Markle, Gord Rayner, and Nabi Kubota were the core of an amazing free improvisation ensemble. Larry Dubin, who I had played with in Mike White's band, blossomed as one of the inventors of free drumming with the AJB. He and Nabi and I also played with the CCMC. Two fine LPs of the Artist Jazz Band exist. One was issued by the Isaacs Gallery, and the other, which I designed, was issued by Music Gallery Editions. Wait a minute now. I think I made a mistake here. Okay, yes. Thank you. This is the cover of, and you can read what it says, is of the last LP, which I made in 1987. And on the other side, the notes say about the cover. Our cover photo shows the priceless artifact in the possession of the Kagyupa sect of Tibetan Buddhist monks, now in Nepal. This artifact indicates the possibility of an astonishing antiquity for the Amitabha ceremony, the simultaneous welcome of Amitabha, the music for which is included in this album. It is a fire ceremony performed by 12 monks, musicians, each playing a different horn or trumpet as they slowly walk around the wood fire. And so that's one of the things that's on the album. And the object is a clay tablet, 12 inches square, in size in a method resembling that of certain cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia, 12th century BC cuneiform. And so this kind of cuneiform, which is a stylus inscription on clay, could be considered the first LP technique. While only 2 musicians are shown on the clay tablet, the cuneiform characters have been translated as multiplied by 6. So that's, and then as well in the album there are really extensive notes, quite long, which include this an introduction. The title of this album, while hopefully an exaggeration, refers to the eventual disappearance of the 33 1/3 RPM microgroove vinyl stylus format. The passing of the long-playing record seems inevitable as newer recording formats advance and earlier ones evolve new forms. This technological forced obsolescence within the industrial world resembles the effects of the technology-based societies on the ancient traditional societies. We could move to slide 8. Yeah. So here is a piece from the last LP with the appropriate commentary from the liner notes. As I say, the liner notes are really go very, very deeply into the ethnomusicological connections with the piece. So here is Encino Buddha. The notes on the album also tell the truth, that all the pieces from Africa, Tibet, China, the Arctic, South America, or wherever are studio constructions made by me. All the voices in Encino Buddha are mine, recorded and mixed with an apparatus that can change pitch, in this case higher, but retain the duration of the original notes. So I did all the parts in, like the Tibetan piece that was mentioned, is several trumpet mouthpiece instruments, or tuba and various brass instruments playing drones, which are recorded one over the other. Anyway, that's Encino Buddha as an example of the last LP. Thank you. Thank you. In 1975, I was represented by the Bikert Gallery in New York. The gallery started a record label called Chatham Square and published the first recordings of the music of Phil Glass. They invited me to record and design an LP. My two-record Chatham Square album was composed of pieces that clearly, each in their own way, included the act of recording itself as a factor in the result. One of the pieces, titled W in the D, is a 26-minute virtuoso whistling solo, which is built on recording my inhaled and exhaled breath on a handheld microphone, as well as the whistled phrase. There are also two piano pieces, Left-Right, which was recorded with the microphone lying on the top of the upright piano, and Falling Stars, which is a sped-up and slowed-down piano phrase. So this album underlined the distinction, or a distinction, between documentary recording, for example, the Louis Armstrong Hot 5 records, and recording as instrument. So we've arrived at another big department of my work, that of sound films. Robert mentioned New York Iron Air Control, but I made it in 1964, and it's a 16 millimeter film. The slightly fascist title is meant to indicate that the sound and picture operate simultaneously, which is conventional, but in this case, the two senses are aesthetically separate, or at least that was what was attempted. rather than in the picture, all the motion is in the revolutionary soundtrack, a formidable group with Albert Eiler on tenor sax, and it's kind of a document of free jazz. The picture consists of fairly static holds in different locations of the walking woman silhouette, about which more later. Wavelength, finished in 1967, uses sync sound more or less conventionally, but also features an electronic glissando, which starts low and gradually rises for 40 minutes. It took 3 years for me to make the 4.5-hour 16-millimeter film, Rameau's Nephew, thanks to Dennis Young, by Wilma Shen. It's built of 30 or so different scenes, each with a completely different cast and location. It's a talking picture. In filmmaking, not in video, picture and sound are separate, and Rameau's Nephew plays with the many sound-image relationships possible because of this mobility, the fact that you can actually move one in relation to the other. It was very hard to choose a typical moment from this film because it's so long and there's so much variety. But I decided on this, the office scene. Would you play the office scene?
Hi, folks. You've got coffee cups for you? My God. What's so amazing? Not only coffee cups speak. Holy smoke, the voice came from this light bulb. Yeah, and it's pretty hard to keep me in one place.
I swear your pants broke, Abe.
That isn't the only place I can be. How about this? This is unbelievable. That piece of cheese broke. What's so unbelievable? How about this? Or this? Or this? Or this? Or is this more convincing?
It's that portrait of Winston Churchill.
Yes, that's right. But where am I now?
There's icebergs in this note seen on that calendar on the wall oak.
That's right. Oops! Oh! Where am I?
After Wavelength, I made Standard Time, which I hope to show tonight. We'll see if there's time. And then the next film I made after that in 1969 was called Back and Forth, and the title could be a double arrow. And the sound in Back and Forth is pretty unusual in that it's in sync with the movement of the entire image, which is built, the whole film is built on back and forth or side to side pans with the camera on a tripod, and then up and down. And so the sound it actually is in sync with the movement of the entire image, not with something that's in the image. So here's a little extract. It's number 11. Yeah, that's at the sort of medium tempo part of the film, and it goes from very slow to very fast. I'd like to show you two or three sound installation works that are not films. Number 12 is called Correspondence, and I did it in 1970. And it's a black and white photograph, which in fact is of two letters which are superimposed one on top of the other. And it's a very big 48 inches by 59 inches blow up of these letters, which actually partly describe the piece that they're in. So there is a portable stereo which plays a tape, which is a superimposed recording of the typewriter typing of the two letters. So it's extremely loud because it's as loud as the pictures are big in relation to their subject. Then 13. This was done in 1976. It's called Hearing Aid, and it's 4 audio cassette players. As you can see, it says there. And the metronome and the 4 cassette players, when you see and hear this work installed, are all actually playing, but what they're playing is a sequence. Let's see, how can I... the metronome is set to play at a kind of, once again, a kind of medium tempo, and the first cassette player that's near the metronome is a recording of the metronome playing, and then the second cassette player is a recording of the metronome and the first tape recording, and so on until the fourth one is a recording. So this piece makes a lot of sound, but it's interesting in that it is kind of sculptural in the sense that you move around. When you move around each one of the cassette players, the sound is completely different. The closer you get, the further you get away from it, the different it is. So it's a very, very environmental thing. And then 14 is called Piano Sculpture, and it was done in 2009. It's 4 video projections and 4 speakers. Let's see here. 15 and 16. So what it is that each of the 4 projections is a different recording of my playing of it, and the image of my playing of it. But the way that I played the piano was derived from thinking about how you make objects with hammers, saws, and what do you call them? Sandpaper, and all the gestures that I used on the piano are derived from how you make an object. Anyway, okay, so 17 is the last one. Is that 17? No, okay. This is 4 to 5, which was done in 1962. In the second year of my working with the Walking Woman outline, which went to from 61 to 67. And it's my first photographic work, which just came out of thinking about placement of the figure or of the cutout as one of the things that could be done with it besides painting on it. Its placement. And it occurred to me that, of course, it doesn't have to be on art gallery walls. It can be anywhere. So I decided to try placing a black cutout figure in a lot of different locations in Toronto and photographing it to make this photographic piece. And I guess maybe many of you know that the Walking Woman works involved pretty much every medium that I could think of. There are many paintings, many mediums, and also the film that I mentioned before, New York Pioneer Control. It was somewhat related to the film Wavelength, and the day that I took the photograph, which is the final shot or final image of Wavelength, I took the photographs for this work, which is a sculpture but has photographs. In 20, after making 4 to 5, I became very, very interested in going further with photography, and did many photographic works other than 4 to 5 with the Walking Woman outline. And then it continued. So the press was made in 1969, a couple of years after I stopped using the Walking Woman outline. And it's 16 black and white prints, and they are they're mounted on packages of polyester rosin, and behind a heavy plexiglass covering, which is clamped, and each photo shows the clamping of some object, like there's a couple of fish, rubber gloves, a calf's brain. Anyway, they are all two-dimensionalized. Three-dimensional things, two-dimensionalized, which is what photography does. 21 is when Polaroid was made, I became interested in using Polaroid and did several different things. And this piece is one that uses a mirror with my image in it, and subsequently the cancellation of the image by the photos. And 22 is it's called 8 by 10, which was a conventional size of photographic prints in the heyday of photography. And it's 80 different photographs, essentially, of or details of, or all of, a rectangle, which is the same proportion as the prints. And I think an important thing about this work is that the prints they're not framed. They are objects with the limits that you can see that are mounted on the wall on two-sided tape. and every time that it's installed is a different arrangement, and it always works interestingly. 23. So this is the top view of in medias res, which is a color photograph, 103 by 139.6 inches, or 261.5 by 354.5 centimeters. And 24. It is shown on the floor, and it is the size and the framing. It is the size of the carpet that's in the photograph. But the carpet also supplied the framing, which is an issue with, which is completely different, which is it is one of the main factors of 8 by 10, but in medias res, the framing is made by one of the objects that's in the image. Uh, 26. This is called Digest. It was done in 1970, and it's archaeology in a sense. When you see the thing exhibited, there's a aluminum pan or container which is filled with a dark, almost black material of some kind. And beside it is a stack of photographs, which are 16 by 14 inches each. And the stack of photographs can be looked at by hand, and they are in sequence. When you look at them, you'll see that they are of the container, which is now filled with some congealed substance, and the photographs in sequence show the addition of many different objects in each stage of the photographs that were taken in putting those objects in the container. So it was done with polyester rosin or epoxy, and was something that was done frantically because I didn't want each time I put something in, I also put the epoxy in and took a photograph. But I wanted to arrive at the top with the thing still not hardening. And of course it eventually did. But now everything that was put in it is recorded in the photos, but you trust that it in fact is in the container. But it is. And the Philadelphia Museum just bought Digest, which I think is very, very brave of them. 27. So this is also a sequence. So I was working on different ways of making sequences with photographs, and climbing a ladder optically or photographically seemed like a very interesting thing. And so there's a slight difference in the it's also a kind of grayscale moving from darker gray to almost white. And an interesting byproduct is that the spaces between each photograph became activated in a way that you can almost see in a reproduction of it, so that there is also a ladder made of the wall. And 28. This is 81. Oh, you have the text there, so it's. This was done by making a white surface, painted white surface, and having a black frame made for it. And then I made a grid. Let's see how to describe this. A black line grid. And the same light which you see in the piece when it's shown, just like this, I set the camera up in front of the rectangle that's in the center, more or less, four rows from the bottom. So the camera was on a tripod right there, and took an exposure for what was right in front of the camera. And centered on each one of these rectangles, I took a photograph, by moving the camera so that it was centered on the rectangle. And then I had those photographs mounted in the rectangle that they represent, which is what the work is. So the shape that was derived has to do, of course, with the fact that the camera was in one position when all the photographs were taken. So it's a particular view of the surface. 29. This is called Field, and it's how many? 90 black and white photographs, which are positive and negative alternating, and it was made by putting the negative photos in a field in the sunlight. What's the word? I don't know how to do that. Well, photo paper, live photo paper. So I just put the paper in the field and just let it expose for a short time. And each one of the images that results, I had a negative made, and that's what is shown, lined up. So many quite interesting things happened, because in some cases a leaf was up against the paper, so you have a very strong photograph of the leaf. Each one is a very, very different image, but they're all derived from being in the field. 30. This is, you can see the dimensions and all that stuff. It was sort of an attempt to stop time in a photograph, because I made the light blue is paint on this very rough wood, and it goes underneath a photograph, and the photograph is of the light blue surface in very dark light conditions, so only illuminated by the candle. So it's a decisive moment, but a moment of color. 31. This is another kind of color mixing thing where I had a little thing to put color gels in and painted a panel a very, very light blue and took a number of photographs of different colors, transparencies projected on that surface, and then had to photograph them and had them mounted on the panel itself. It's actually, the photographs repeat as they go. Oh, that's too complicated. 32. This is called imposition. And again, the interest was in making superimpositions, but very, very controlled. It's actually 4 superimpositions of the wall and floor, then the sofa, then the people clothed, then the people nude. And they're superimposed one on top of the other. And I posed them looking at a piece of paper that's exactly the same proportion as the photo that they are in, but they're looking at it sideways, which is, I think, understandable. I hope it's understandable, as an indication that they're correcting something that they're looking at. And interestingly, I was rewarded once, if that's the right way to put it, of seeing some people looking at imposition on exhibition and having them tilt their heads that way, which it calls for, but I once saw proof that somebody does it. 33, it's called multiplication table. And it's when it says 43 inches in the drawing for a table that someone might make, it is 43 inches. So that's how the size of, that's another thing that I've been interested in, of course, with my photographic work, is determining different ways for having a reason for the size. 34. And this is a painting that came from thinking about the distortions that happen because of the lenses in photography. And so you don't see an original subject, but it is a distortion of an equally divided grid in a photographic way, but it's a painting. 35. I've done a number of things that use the transparency that you see through something. And this was the first one. It's called Shade. It happens to be, it's Pierre T. Berger's back. One of the things that happens that is hopefully interesting is that one sees this is hung at sort of live height, about 6 feet off the ground, and the back is of someone standing in a position that one might be in. Excuse me. Looking at something in a gallery. But if you walk around to the other side, it's sometimes I know that it's astonishing. It's exactly the same. And I've had this corroborated that you find that you expected a face. But it's very pure photography. It's as thin as photography gets, and photography's thin. 36. that uses enlargement, because the hand with the match is very, very big, but the door is a kind of normal door size. So you can sort of read it in some ways that it actually is a painting that was a certain size, which you can tell by the size of the hand, and it's enlarged. So it includes a kind of zoom in the minds of the spectator, I hope. 38. Oh, sorry, that's 37. Yeah, okay. This is 38. It's called Times, and more boasting. This was also acquired by the Philadelphia Museum recently. It's almost 2 meters by 138 centimeters, so it's quite big. But I think that spending a little time with it, you see that everything works to make it an integrated image, so that the shapes that are in the abstract painting are echoed or perhaps it's the reverse in the painting. So the attempt was to make a kind of unity of the parts that were a painting or was a painting, and its location it was very small, and the floorboards are kind of typical floorboards, side by size. 39. This is a kind of combination of painting and photography, in that I made the little abstract objects out of plaster and photographed them on the colored papers, as you see, and then had a print made of that and painted all the little objects. So it does combine photography and painting and sculpture in a kind of unified way. 40. This is in 85 or 84, 85, 86. I did a lot of things using holography, and this is one of them, which has it's me breaking an egg which is caught in midair on its way down to a frying pan, and when you look at it, you can see the space between my hands and the real skillet. 41 and 42 are slide words, or a slide word called recombinant. And recombinant, I made all the slide images, but they're projected not on a wall or on a screen, but on a panel that I made for it to be projected on. So the slides have some reference or distant reference or close reference to the panel. And each one is a different relationship and spatial and so forth between what's projected on and the surface that is projected on. 43 is backlit transparency, which was completely constructed as a transparency using the box itself, which it was finally shown in. And 44. This is a very, very big transparency work. It's not backlit. It's like shade that you walk around it to see what the difference is from one side to the other. Theoretically, or in actual fact, they are the same. But there are some interesting issues that come up in looking at it. I think uh, 45. This was called Plutar or later, and it was done in 1977. And that's a long view. It's shown on four walls of a gallery, and it belongs to the National Gallery. And 46. So it is photographs, color photographs that are mounted in a certain way, and they're in these very, very, very heavy black frames, and they are photographs which I took of what was at that time a group of 7 room in the National Gallery before it moved, and in every photograph of, in taking every photograph, I moved the camera in different ways in each one of the photographs, so that there are a couple of strict photographs, but mostly the images have different speeds of smears, of glances in them. And I went around the room, and the last one shows, for example, the corner of the room. We have the next one. So that's one of them. Yeah. And that one, this one contains the previous one, but sped. So it kind of zips around the room, but I considered each one of the moves as a kind of stroke, because it's of paintings, and in a way it's a tribute to the paintings, but it's photography painting. I think there's another. Is there another? Yes. That's the corner, one of the corners of the room, and that too. Yeah, that's moved. That's the next one, and that's the next one. No, that jumps to a little bit further on. Next, please. Yes, yeah, it comes to a variation on Tom Thompson's painting. And then we're jumping to sculpture here. This is called Blind. It was done in 1968. And it's, as you can see, you can walk in it. It was shown recently at the AGO in the sculpture show that I had there, which was over about a year ago. But there are 4 panels, and looking through them at different areas is quite different. It's something that's quite varied. And okay, 55. Oh yeah. Sorry, 54. 55. This is Scope, also from 1967, and it's. It has the next one. Yeah, it has 2 wall panels, and it actually is a big periscope. That next, and next, that's Whelan, and it's just simply that that when you look through it, you see the other side, but it's seen as a kind of long tunnel. And if there's someone there, as in this photo, they become part of the work in a way. And there's a kind of looking back and forth thing that happens. I'd like to show, finally, a film which is 8 minutes and 20 seconds. It's called Standard Time, and it's a sound film, and I think the sound is pretty interesting. And because I was only showing fragments of the other films, I thought I would like to show something that's complete. And that's what we're going to do. So this is Standard Time.
There's two aspects of it. One is being audience involvement or reaction, which is essential, I think, in all things. And the other is being aware, really physically, technically, as far as a distraction or a hindrance or a help or whatever. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we're always aware of the audience and what we're giving it. But for the most part, I don't think that, luckily, because of the spaces we've had to work for the piece about the audience intruding or disturbed. Three faces. I try to look at the audience as a mass and try not to distinguish any faces, so that my concentration is a lot of individuals.
I was very concentrated in the theater that I could not see personal life. It was completely unclean experience. I was